So once upon a time, there was a farmer, and he had 3 sons. He worked a large body of land, and as he neared the end of his days, he realized that it was indeed fruitful enough and large enough to divide into 3 parcels that his sons could then develop for their own families. His sons, unfortunately, bickered frequently and didn't get along very well. So one day, the farmer called all 3 of his sons to his bedside, and he said, "I don't have long for this earth. I have left a legacy for you in the ground." And the sons became quite excited. They didn't know that their father was a wealthy man. And when he soon passed, they resolved that they would go digging for this legacy. And so they gathered their strength and they dug through one of their inherited plots. They dug through another of their inherited plots. No treasure. They were sure that it would be in the third. They tripled their efforts, dug even deeper. No treasure. At the end of that time, they thought, well, we didn't find it this year, but we know it's here. Dad didn't lie. As long as the earth is all dug up, let's plant the fields. And so they did that. They planted the fields. And of course, in the spring, up came the fields. In the fall, they had plenty of food to harvest. They could take it to the market. They were able to support their new families. Well, when the fields went fallow again, they said, okay, this year we're going to find it. So they went back out there. This time they got backhoes. No more shovels. They got tractors. And they dug up even another layer. And didn't find it in the first field, didn't find it in the second field, and they didn't find it in the third field. I'm sure you're surprised to learn. So, well, we didn't find it this year. Well, we'll have to look again next year. In the meantime, let's plant the seeds and we'll do this again. So they planted the seeds, and springtime comes along, they start to bud. Fall comes along, they harvest, take it to market. Now they've all got kids, and they also have enough money and food to take care of them. So finally, the third year comes along, and once again, they're not the quickest family. But they did it again. And of course, they found nothing. And finally, at the end of that time, they planted the corn and the fields. And when springtime came around again and things started to grow, one of them had that aha moment and said, wait a minute. The legacy is the fields. And the other one said, yeah. And we have to work for it to keep it. And the other one didn't have anything to add. He was the quiet one. But he agreed. And so from that time forward, they celebrated every season. They knew that their father had left them this rich legacy, which they, of course, had to work for. We have been granted a legacy, perhaps from our parents, perhaps in riches, or perhaps in values. We've also are currently living in the legacy of Unitarian Universalism, which is something that we all have to work to uphold. And of course, we are in the legacy of solstice celebrations and of Christmas, both of which have a spirit to them, which we must work to uphold. So this is my last Sunday sermon of 2013. And as that entirely imaginary finish line draws near, I will be crossing it on fumes. Now, part of that is my particular circumstance, most of which I courted on purpose. with some unexpected consequences, yes. And some of it is just this time of year, with all its commitments and invitations and preparations and promises and connections, all of which I love and embrace and welcome, and as it turns out, hustle like a whirlwind for. And it's just time of year. We're all like this. We're all hustling like whirlwinds at this time of year. Like whirlwinds wrapped in cyclones, stuffed in a tornado, and jammed into a haboob. It's like the turducken of disaster meteorology. It's a whirl cyclonaboob. I knew that, of course, this would be the case. I also knew and know that I'm not alone in this feeling, and I'm sure many of you, in addition to the daily trials of life, some of which are substantial, you have been rushing to get the presents got, to wrap them, clean the house in preparation for guests or in preparation to leave it as clean as you can as you pack and haul your luggage onto the conveyor belt after waiting in overheated, interminable lines of sad-looking people going to presumably happy places. It's just that time of year. It's like everybody's birthday on the same day. And we're all trying to make it perfect for everyone. Or at least to survive everyone's drive to that impossible perfection. It's crazy. And it's sweet. But it's just an exhausting time of year for everyone. And so when I conceived of today's service, when I considered what ministry you might need today, it occurred to me that you might need just a little bit of peace. And I don't mean peace as opposed to violence or war. I don't mean peace as opposed to or including peace of mind. What I want to give you is space. A scoop of time to be without hurry, without demand. Just resting and reviving and breathing, cultivating the serene. So, inviting peace, we will start with a little meditation. This is called the Yan Om Ah. The Yan Om Ah. It's a word that I made up. It means yawn. It means om, and ah. You've done this before. I think you might even have done the advanced version, because I hear some laughter out there. The advanced version begins with laughter. It's called the ha-ha yamama. So before we start, I know you know how to laugh. I know you know how to yawn. I've seen you during my sermons. And I know you know how to ah. I've heard you do that. But I want to make sure that when we get to the om part that you don't slack off. So really hit that om. Make it last. It'll reverberate in your sternum and your skull and your neck. It feels really good. Okay, so feet on the floor. Get into a good meditative posture, and we'll slow it down. As always, it starts with breathing. So draw attention to your breath. Let each breath carry you deeper into the next. We'll inhale one more deep breath and exhale with a ha 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 ha. Another deep breath, and follow this one with a yawn. Letting it all fall away. Keep coming back to your breath. Big belly breath, and exhale with an Om. Lastly, we will conclude with an Ah. Deep breath. Ah. You may maintain this meditative state if you wish. All will be well. All will be well. These are 4 words written by Julian of Norwich, who, aside from being a proto-universalist, preached that God was the father and mother of the world. Julian lived in a time of terrors, of which the Black Death was most prominent. It was a time of darkness when violence and disease were thought to be divine punishments for sin. Yet Julian preached that her God loved everyone. Or to translate, that everyone is inherently worthy, inherently lovable. God loves everyone, and so eventually and in the end, all would be well. This is in the face of the Black Death and deadly theology. She was a light in that darkness. We've spoken about how this time of year is about light in darkness, about us being our own sons, about love in the midst of pain, peace in the midst of turmoil, perseverance in the midst of fear, compassion in the midst of conflict. These are great things, powerful perspectives, and finally triumphant perspectives. But how? How can I, how can we if But Julian assures us all will be well. Yet when I entertain the notion that all will be well, my mind protests wildly. I even get a little angry because it's not true, right? All will not be well for many people, right? All will be well. My reaction is in the pattern of a wave, with troughs of irritation and crests of acceptance. I find I am unable to resist resisting it, while also unable to resist the truth of it. All will be well. It compels me beyond myself. For Julian of Norwich, what was beyond the self was known as God. My own religious vocabulary is not as certain to me as hers was to her. But as I pursue my thoughts and my objections to this notion that all will be well, I am led finally outside of myself into some larger expanse of identity. And while that is scary at first, it is a place at last of peace. Patience, hope, mercy, grace, it's only love that never ends. Last fall, when I was ailing and worse, ashamed and scared of it, I spoke with someone who told me about the idea of meditating on the bones. It's a Buddhist or Taoist-derived meditation that conjures the sensation and or knowledge of impermanence and nothingness, and believe it or not, therefore, serenity. I forget exactly how it was described to me, but I do remember how I understood it. I would meditate on what was troubling me and pursue it always down the path of its most negative, reasonable consequence. And usually this landed me 6 feet under. Sometimes it was something worse. Sometimes it wasn't much of anything. The impacts of these imaginings were never limited to me alone. And yet the meditation revealed that beyond my suffering and death, there was time and healing and eventually laughter and love and more life. Erica Jong has written a poem, part of which reads, "We meditate on our bones only to let them blow away with fewer regrets. Flesh is merely a lesson. We learn it and pass on." There is something beyond our worry, something beyond our suffering, something beyond our hurry. And it's there where peace abides. Patience, hope, mercy, and grace, it's only love that never ends. All will be well becomes a meditation on the bones. Now, the fact is, when I looked into it, a bone meditation is far more literal than I initially understood. But it comes to the same thing in the end. So I would invite you now to join me in a bone meditation, unwrapping this gift of peace, perhaps finding ourselves beyond our worry, beyond our suffering, beyond our to-do lists or what we have to do after church. I will walk you through a meditation on the bones. I will conclude it by saying, all will be well. At that time, I invite you to turn to a neighbor at your side, take their hands in yours, give them your hands, look them in the eyes, and assure them all will be well. And receive that assurance, if you're able. I would also ask that we respect the silence beyond that, and for the sake of the meditation, say nothing but those 4 words. If your other neighbor looks neglected, you might have to do it again with them. So once again, let's get comfortable, feet on the floor, find your breath, get in a good posture. Start with your breath. Now, starting with your left big toe, we're going to begin visualizing our skeleton. So imagine the bones shining in your toe, in your right big toe, your feet shining. Imagine the bones of your ankle. Your bright shin bones. See the skeleton of your legs. And now your hips shining brightly. Imagine your vertebrae, your ribs, your sternum, your fingertips, the bones in your arms. See your clavicle, all these connected. Shoulder blades, the vertebrae up your neck and your skull, your eye sockets, shining brightly now your whole skeleton. And now, see it dissolve. See the bone dust being blown away, so that where your shining white bones once were, there is now only emptiness. Notice any feelings that arise. Let them pass. All will be well. You may turn to your neighbor now. I'm going to wrap this up with a Christmas bow. The writer of the Gospel of Luke was the only gospel writer to include the story of the birth of Jesus. He crafts the nativity myth for a good reason. There is huge wisdom, not exclusive to Luke or to Christianity, mind you, in grounding a Messiah story in innocence. Not innocence from sin so much as innocence from pain and from the disappointments of life. Innocence is free of judgmentality, free of expectations, free of to-do lists. Innocence is unmitigated, inherent worth. Innocence is wildly open to love, lovable, and loving. It's unafraid of death. This is what salvation is. So, of course, Luke, or the writer of Luke, totally amps up the innocence dial. Such innocence that Mary got pregnant without losing her virginity. Seriously, this is life pristine. It is beyond possible innocence. But you know, it's a story. The impossible is included for a reason. It is there as a teacher. And this teacher tells us, all will be well.